Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about The Unseen 2 by Bryan Smith, and this is from Grindhouse. For your nutshell, I'm just going to read the back cover copy, which I haven't read, so potential spoilers for the first book, The Unseen. Let's see what the back cover copy has to say. 6 months after losing everything that once mattered to her, Allison Cook's life is mired in a grim downward spiral. The otherworldly entity, known only as the Visitor, still haunts her, still feeds on her emotions and desires, leading her to the brink of madness and despair. In the beginning, the creature's impossible gifts from other realms made the erosion of her humanity an acceptable sacrifice, but now they're no longer enough. The all-consuming darkness growing within her becomes too much to bear, and she begins to yearn for a restoration of what was lost. Unfortunately, the granting of this wish only leads her down even darker and stranger paths from which she may never return. Deeper than ever into the unseen. So there's your nutshell. Don't know if it'll make sense to anybody who hasn't read the first book, but we'll get into it. So for the too long didn't watch folks, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. And, well, I'll tell you why. First of all, The Unseen. In The Unseen, Allison Cook, had to double check that name. She is a mega horror fan. She doesn't have a lot of friends. She has a few, but she's considered a weirdo, being a mega horror fan and everything. And she's at a horror convention, and she meets this guy that, I forget exactly what he tells her, but he shows her a videotape that is a Friday the 13th sequel that was never made in Allison Cook's world. And she's a huge Friday the 13th fan. She's seen every movie. She knows everything about it. And I think he's the one that tells her that it's a Friday the 13th sequel from another world. This is a multiverse kind of story, and he has the ability to get things from other worlds, which includes movies that were never made here. And this leads into the greater story in the first book. So this, again, takes place 6 months later. And because of the events of the first book, Allison Cook, her life is spiraling. And I wasn't sure where things were going at the beginning of the book. It took a little while for it to pull me in. I like Bryan Smith's writing, and so I didn't have any problems with that. I just didn't know where things were going. But it wasn't that long before I was drawn in. What the hell's going to happen? One of the nice things that Bryan Smith does is a lot of cliffhanger endings for each chapter. And so you feel compelled to keep going. What the hell is going to happen? And it feels like, to me, and I've mentioned this in another review of a Bryan Smith book, it feels as if Bryan Smith is definitely a pantser. This could be completely untrue. He could outline the shit out of these books before he writes them. But the way they're written, the way they read, it feels very breakneck paced, and that he is simply writing. I'm just writing this chapter. Let's see where it goes. He writes that cliffhanger ending without knowing exactly how he's going to deal with what's happening, which I really enjoy. I feel like going back and reading some of his earliest works, perhaps House of Blood, his first leisure book, I believe his first novel, to see if that old stuff has the same feeling. Because I really, really enjoy that, and I felt it in the last book that I read. And as I said, this could be completely wrong. It's just the feeling that I get that he's completely pantsing it. And if there's anybody who doesn't know what that term means, it's basically the opposite of planning. People ask, are you a pantser or a planner? Ask writers that. And a planner is someone who outlines the book, knows the chapters beat by beat. There's variations of this depending on the writer, but have, copious notes and everything. And then pantsers might have an idea where the story is going to end up, might just have a character idea in mind, might have nothing when they start, but basically are just winging it as they're writing. Bryan Smith does post updates on his Facebook quite often about, how much he wrote for a night, where he's at, and once he's finished, he'll update about his editing. I got 4 chapters edited tonight. I cut this much, or I had to change this, or do whatever. But I don't recall him talking about, this is what I planned. So, excuse me, I really, really enjoy this aspect, this feeling that I get from his writing, that things are moving at a breakneck pace, and that he was just as surprised as I am by what's happening. And so we have, again, Alison Cook, low point in her life. I can't go into details. I don't want to spoil any of this, but there's a point where things take a turn for her, seemingly for the worse, and then even for the worse than that. But then, perhaps, there's a little light on the horizon. Or maybe things are going to get even worse. I like where the story went. And just recently, as of this recording, Bryan Smith finished The Unseen 3. It's actually out now. He finished writing, finished the editing, and then it was put out. The only thing that bugs me is that it's in a mass market paperback size, which I love, except that The Unseen and The Unseen 2 are both in trade paperback size, so it's not going to match. Which, my slightly OCD-ness, it bugs me. It's not going to stop me from getting it. It's not going to stop me from having all 3 books together. But I just like to have them looking the same. I like a set of books to look like a set of books. That's all neither here nor there and has nothing to do with the review of this. But obviously then, if there's a third book, this story does leave space for a sequel. It technically, you could read this book all by itself. I think it gives you enough, eventually, gives you enough to understand what's going on with Alison Cook. You're not going to know at the beginning. But eventually you'll get the pieces to put together to say, okay, I have a vague idea of how she ended up at this point in her life. And it does have an ending. It's not a cliffhanger or anything. I guess depending on how you look at it. Maybe anybody else who has read it might argue that it is a cliffhanger. But you could just read this as a standalone book. It'd be crazy to, but you could. And I'm very excited to get to the third one. I haven't picked it up yet because I was going to say something, but if you haven't watched my weekly wrap-up video from, let's see, at the point this goes up, probably 3 weeks ago, you wouldn't know what I was talking about. Needless to say, I haven't picked up The Unseen 3 yet. I will be picking it up relatively soon. Not exactly sure when I'll read it, but I'm probably not going to have as big a gap between 2 and 3 as I did between 1 and 2. But all of that is to say, I really liked this book. 4 out of 5 stars for The Unseen 2 by Bryan Smith. Well written. Interesting characters. I can't say good characters, because there aren't a lot of good characters in here. There are a couple that might be considered good, but we don't necessarily get to know them well enough. or their normal circumstances well enough, because there's just so much bizarre stuff going on in here. And but it's just well written. It's fast paced. It's breakneck paced, and just really really good. 4 out of 5 stars. Bryan Smith, The Unseen 2. So I think that's all I have to say about that. Excuse me. Question for this video. I did not think ahead. Let's just go with, are you familiar with Bryan Smith? Are you a Bryan Smith fan? Easy enough. I am. I think that's obvious. I have right over there all of his leisure books, mass market size leisure books by Bryan Smith. And then in the other room, right back there, I have all of the other Bryan Smith stuff that I have. Tons of trade paperback sized books. There is Bryan Smith stuff. There are Bryan Smith books that I don't have. There is Bryan Smith stuff that I don't have. Check my grammar for me, please. There are some of his books that I don't have. Actually, his last 3 new releases, I believe, because I haven't picked up The Unseen 3 yet. I've already mentioned that. But he had a couple other releases that I just didn't have a chance to pick up. Being unemployed was a big part of that. And now that I am employed again, catching them up on bills and other things before I start deep diving back into picking up books and such. But yeah, I've enjoyed pretty much everything that I have read from him. I think if you go back and look at all the reviews I've done of Bryan Smith stuff, probably the majority of them are 4 out of 5. I don't think there would be anything lower than a 3. But yeah, I mean, I discovered him through leisure, followed him to the other publishers that he's had. I believe he has something coming out from Flame Tree Press later this year or possibly next year. I don't remember the schedule. So that's nice. He's back with Don Diaria, who was his editor at Leisure. And he's done a lot of self-publishing and a lot of publishing through Grindhouse, other places. Excuse me. And yeah, plenty of his I have plenty of his stuff to read. Plenty of stuff I haven't even picked up yet. But I'm a big enough fan that I definitely want to pick up everything that I can, read everything I can for Bryan Smith. But what about you? Have you read any of his stuff? Are you a fan? Do you dislike it? If you don't like it, let me know. Let me know why. But let's talk Bryan Smith in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. Try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, I'll have links for my Instagram and Bluesky in the description below. That's all I've got. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith. And until next time, read more books.